What do you mean by anti-cringe?
I think it's better, like, if we talk about what cringe is, I proposed to my girlfriend and this is what it taught me about B2B SaaS. And if you are a high ticket service provider, you don't need eyeballs, you need trust. So then it becomes less about like using divisive hooks. And it becomes more about like leaving, I always refer to them as like brand breadcrumbs to show people how you think about the problem that you solve and to build trust with your audience.
Hey, Angie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, this is actually a fun fact for our listeners. Your second time on the show because we had you before, and then it turns out the recording was not good on my end. I was recording from an old laptop. So this is our second go around at this topic. So maybe it'll be more streamlined. Who knows? The good news is I completely forgot about our last conversation. So we'll be approaching it from the exact same angle.
Yeah, it'll be so fun.
Yeah. And then that's what happens when you have ADHD. You just forget a lot of things all the time. Anyways, so Angie, what would you say you're known for? What's your claim to fame?
So I think my claim to fame at this stage of my career is helping people create anti-cringe LinkedIn content. So I do a lot of ghostwriting for LinkedIn. I'm also a fractional head of content and work with companies to build their thought leadership. But my thing that I guess I'm known for and that I speak on occasionally is the anti-cringe factor for LinkedIn.
What do you mean by anti-cringe?
I think it's better, like, if we talk about what cringe is, because I think that you know that because you've seen it, right? Like I proposed to my girlfriend and this is what it taught me about B2B SaaS sales. That guy. So not that. There's thought leadership that builds trust and is helpful. And I think where we sometimes go wrong is, like, I'm going to use Justin Welsh as an example. He's a brilliant creator, but his business model is very different from somebody who is, trying to land. Like, a lot of my clients are fractional executives or consultants. And if you are a high ticket service provider, you don't need eyeballs, you need trust because you're asking for a seat at someone's leadership team table. So then it becomes less about like publishing nonstop and, using divisive hooks. It becomes more about like leaving, I always refer to them as like brand breadcrumbs to show people how you think about the problem that you solve and to build trust with your audience.
When you introduced yourself, you said anti-cringe, and we talked about, I give you the example of what cringe looks like, and we will recognize that. But it begs a question. I have this question. Why is it so important for you to be known as anti-cringe?
Mostly because when people come to me, they are thinking, okay, I'm going to talk to a LinkedIn ghostwriter and she's going to make me write things like I've seen on LinkedIn that I absolutely hate. And I think for a lot of the leaders that I work with, because usually the people I work with are in some sort of leadership role or they're a higher level consultant. So they don't want to appear divisive. They don't want to get a lot of attention. They just legitimately want to build trust. And so they're very protective of their image, and rightly so. And so they don't want to chase tactics to try and get a ton of eyeballs if at the expense of trust. And a lot of the people I work with, like, they have not been on LinkedIn before, or if they have, it's just been like those kind of company update type things. And they're really wanting to build thought leadership, but they are usually really humble and they have a ton of experience and they know enough to know that they don't know everything. And I think that sometimes, people say, well, what's the one thing you could be the foremost expert on in the world? And when you say that to really brilliant, experienced leaders, they're like, there's nothing that I'm the foremost expert on, but I do have a point of view based on years of experience and wisdom. And those things are worth talking about.
Now, you speak specifically to, at least on your website messaging, fractional CMOs as your audience. Is that the case? Is that, for the most part, who you mean to target?
So there's two different pieces to my business. One is I support fractional CMOs on their engagements. So I'm a fractional head of content. I'm a former marketing director, and I just decided that I was ready to retire from ever standing up a CRM again, or ever replatforming another e-commerce website. When I left corporate, I was like, here are the things I do not want to do anymore. And so I have great respect for for fractional CMOs and marketing leaders. And so I'm kind of in a support role there. But then when I'm actually writing for LinkedIn content, if it's not part of a larger like corporate engagement, a lot of times I would say fractional executives across the board. And then I do have some in-house leaders that I write for too.
Got it. So we're talking about anti-cringe, thought leadership, content, and you have a different angle on this too, which is your AI take. You want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah. So I think it's kind of weird when you start talking about building authentic personal brands and authentic leadership. And then I tell people that I use AI to write their content. They feel like those things are mutually exclusive and they're not. The biggest thing that I work with clients on is you don't need a prompt, you need a knowledge base, is what I say. So I think where a lot of people go wrong with using AI to write their thought leadership or their social posts is they put in a prompt, and a lot of times it's not even a great prompt. But even if you put in just a great prompt, there's so much nuance and context that you're not giving that AI to sound like you, to tell your stories, to share your point of view in a way that's going to resonate with your particular audience. So when I start a new client engagement, we always go through and we build a knowledge base. So that's, kind of the basic brand stuff about their business, who they're looking to reach. And then right down to like I do story hunting. So like we play some fun games to kind of like get stories from their career. And then we mine for wisdom and POVs and put all of that together so that we're giving that AI engine the context, make the content like actually move the needle.
The context is so important. I've found I've stopped personally using AI. Even if I do give it context, as much as I try, it misses so much context. I tend to be a storyteller in the sense that I have these little anecdotes to reinforce my points. And in AI, I can't possibly sit there all day and think about every instance of little anecdote to give it. And I've found it's quite exhausting using AI. So let's take your sharing is really interesting, because AI as a writing tool is not something I've found has been really effective for me. You can get something good out of it every once in a while. We'll say that as long as you give it the right context. But yeah, because of that detail, really, the anecdotal stories detail, it really struggles, because it's the same thing. If you gave your prompt to any writer, right? It's not just AI. If you gave your prompt to any writer, please write a post about this experience in my life, they would need more context to do a good job, just like an AI would. It's like now like AI can read your mind. So I'm wondering how you overcome that hurdle. How do you get those juicy little details? Is it just from doing it consistently?
So I guess it's a couple things. One is I like to refer to it as the AI sandwich. So you have like your strategy layer, which is kind of like your piece of bread, right? And then you have your AI tools layer where AI can come in and help. But then for what I do, then I'm always coming back in and editing. I edit the daylights out of everything that I get out of AI. I actually started my career as a journalist. So part of my process with clients is we hop on a call every month and I interview them for 30 minutes. So we're constantly building on that knowledge base. And then we're also adding more. One of my favorite questions is what's something you taught somebody this week? And because I think especially when I'm working with experts, like it gets to that, like the stuff that you forget. It's old news to you because you've been living in that world forever. So I think to answer your question, it's two things. It's intentionally mining for that context. And then also like not just turning AI loose, without kind of a human counterpart.
Yeah. And you really do kind of need a human to draw that out of you, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I could sit and craft a list of questions, and I'm sure you do this in your work too. Like you start down a road of talking to someone and then it sparks another thing and you're like, wait, tell me more about that. And like I had a journalism professor who always said a good interview is a good conversation. And I don't see AI being quite there.
No, AI doesn't know how to dig for a story. It can do an initial kind of a job if you give it some kind of a prompt to ask me questions, blah, blah, blah. But it's not quite as intuitive. You need intuition. Like human intuition is a very real skill in all areas of life, whether it's my wife as a mom and having intuition, or me as an interviewer, you as a former journalist. knowing intuitively, oh, there's a word, there's a tone of voice. Oh, there was a shift in the body language. I need to go there. I need to ask that. I need to, there's little clues, so to speak, that people leave as they give you the initial answer to your question. And it takes true skill to go after the story behind the story, and sometimes the story behind that, and so on and so forth, following those relevant rabbit trails, so to speak. It makes sense that you could get use out of it with a regular meeting. I mean, it's the same business model we use with our clients, just for a video, short form video output, just not for any kind of other type of content. But you're right, that challenge of remembering things it's a big one. I think unless you're journaling every day, and I know some folks advocate for this. Who was it? I had her on the podcast, Renee Froyo. We were talking about this, former journalist as well, turned marketer, just like yourself. And she mentioned, get in the habit of writing down your stories, just anything. Just get in the habit of writing it down daily. And then you can use it. And if you don't use it, you don't use it. And I was like, that's a good practice, because I see that in all years of my life, not just in my business, not in just my clients' businesses, but like things we forget about ourselves. I've read my journal from 10 years ago. I was like, wow, I didn't realize I was that insightful, or I was that wise. We get the wrong impression of ourselves. And you're right. We do tend to look down on our own knowledge. It's the wrong way to say it, but you know what I mean? We don't value what we know. It's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where over time, the more you know, the less confident you are about what you know. And that's one of my pet peeves, to be fair, with the folks that are like newer to LinkedIn and stuff. They're just like saying these things, these hot takes, and you're like, come on, guys, what the heck? The people who should have a voice don't, and that's what drives me in my business.
I think another thing to kind of build on what you said about like forgetting our stories is that I think there's this conventional advice to like, well, just, take a random story from your week and then go work backwards and find the point, where you can reinforce like what you're trying to say. And that ends up with like the cringy type content where it's like, well, I ordered a pizza this evening. To me, it should be the opposite. So we should start with that red thread, the point that we want to communicate, and then you find a story that supports that. And to your point, in order to do that, you have to have a lot of stories to choose from. So one of the things I do with new clients, and this is not mine, I stole this from Matthew Dick's Stories That Sell, and it's first, last, best, worst. So you pick a prompt, so like job, for example, and what was your first job, your last job, your worst job, your best job, and you just go through and think about stories related to those. And I find a lot of good, especially it's really fun when I ask my leaders about managers, which they always have, you kind of have to be mindful of how you're talking about maybe past managers. But there's a lot of great lessons that come from those stories. And those stories are what make your writing inherently human.
I love that framework. And I do think that's what we talked about last time. And I remember you sharing that. And I walked away from our conversation going, that is pure gold. Those frameworks like that get at the emotional memories that we have. Because I guarantee every one of those first, last, worst, best is tied to a strong emotional memory, because we don't remember things with our brains. We remember them with our hearts, with our emotions. Think of your best memories, and they're all very highly emotional memories, or your strongest memories, not even your good ones, just any strong memory tied to a strong emotion. So I love that question, because it taps right into that. And I would expect then as well, because it is an emotional memory to you, if you then transfer that story into whatever medium, and you communicate that to a bunch of people, they will have an emotional connection with it, because they will resonate with a similar, oh, that reminds me of my thing. And you'll get higher forms of engagement and things like that.
Yeah, totally. So I do the content question with my clients, which is basically your value prop flipped on its head. So like, whereas my value prop might be, I help fractional executives build authentic brands through thought leadership. The content question is just taking that and going, how can fractional executives build authentic brands through thought leadership? So, and whenever people get lost on like, what should I write about? Like, that's my answer to that, is just go answer that with 80% of your content. And you can blend those stories, like even a story from my first job, which was working in the kitchen at a nursing home. But I learned things about that actually helped me, or while I was doing that actually helped me with what I do now. And so that's kind of what you're looking for, is that connection to that larger message that you're trying to be known for, and the little human aspects to, I mean, all those little things along the way are what make what we do important to us.
Yeah, those human experiences, which are human psychology and universal lessons, those are fantastic ones. We're all not all that different. We just might have an experience with someone that someone else had. There's nothing new under the sun, so to speak. When you turn this framework, let's say the less, first, worst to best, on yourself, do you find it's just as easy to create your own content, or do you ever think, I need someone to ask me these questions?
I hate doing my own content. It was always the last thing on. I mean, I'm sure you're the same way, right? Like, it's just, it's harder too because you don't have the perspective. So one of the things that I always say to clients when we're starting out together is like, it's my job to tell your story, but a lot of that involves helping you read the label from inside the bottle because you're so close to it. So yes, I desperately wish I wish someone would ask me these questions, and I wish someone would hold me accountable to a publishing schedule.
That's just those two things, isn't it? That's 80% of it. And when you think about it, like I found that with our clients, it's like 80% of why our clients pay us the monthly fee for video content is because A, they have accountability to actually be on their calendar every month. There it is. There's the appointment with Sonia, our producer. And B, they have Sonia asking questions and doing research on behalf of their clients. It's exactly what you do and what most of us content thought leadership folks do. It's just that outside perspective holding you accountable. And the 20% is, the fun, nuanced stuff and the frameworks you bring and the IP and all that stuff. Yeah, it really is that simple. But the way I solved in my business is I just had Sonia, we have a standing meeting now, and I treat myself like a client. She interviews me every month, and it's always interesting the questions she comes up with. I'm like, oh, I never would have thought of that.
Yes, I can totally see that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe this is that simple. Find maybe this is my moment to plug the Content Buddy system. I do it all the time. It's like, find a buddy. Have you ever, maybe you got to find somebody that's like you that you want to build a relationship with. Who knows? Like a great referral partner.
That's such a good suggestion.
You bet. That's like the main takeaway people get when I do this talk on the Content Buddy system. The whole thought leadership and why video first, and people go like you just said. Oh, sometimes we just don't think of what we don't think about.
Well, especially as service providers too, I think we get so busy thinking about what our clients need that it's easy to forget like what support we need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about a thought leadership context, a lot of fractionals and other types of service providers. Using AI for that. Have you ever gotten pushback for using AI?
I honestly, no. I really don't think I have. I think I'm really upfront about it, even in discovery calls. And so I think if somebody was like, they'd be out right away. But I've never had I don't think I've ever lost business, not that I know of anyway, talking about AI. And I think part of it is like, it's so key to my process for doing it well and thoughtfully across multiple clients. Writing in 10 different voices it's hard. It's hard shifting between clients and writing in different people's voices. And that's one of the areas that I think AI is most helpful for me, because it kind of acts like a checks and balances, because I do like a whole voice document that goes with every client. So those key phrases that people use, I have one client that she's a fractional CMO, and she always, instead of bad leads, she will say garbage leads. And like AI picked up on that and like put it in her content. And that might have been something that either I overlooked or, 2-3 months down the road, I might forget to include that. So it's with something as nuanced as language, I think it can actually be really helpful. So I talk about it as being key to my process, I guess, in my discovery calls.
That's so interesting. I always love having conversations with other writers, because we do some writing, right? When we write the post script with the video, we don't have like so many of these challenges, I'll say, because it's like all we have to do is capture their voice and that's it. Like we'll write what they say, verbatim sometimes if need be in the post. Yeah, but that makes sense. I can't imagine. That's hard to scale. I mean, is this the size you always want to be? Is where you're doing now with, a handful of clients and you're good? Or
I go back and forth on that a lot. I haven't decided. So Right now, I have retainer clients, so more corporate clients, and then I have my solos. And I like having a mix of both. I think I could scale on the solo side with some help, but it hasn't been like so far I've been able to handle it. And there's some months where I'm like, oh, maybe I should bring somebody on.
I encourage you to build your bench ahead of time. That was one of the best pieces of advice I heard from, I don't know. You get advice over the years and you're like, wait, I actually don't know that one anymore. Dang. I used to know my advice pretty. I could have been my coach. It could have been a group I was part of, but yeah. And I started doing that with my producer a year ago, and started bringing on people before I needed them. And then it was really helpful because then when we needed to, scale up and, oh, I need to delegate this to you, they were a few months in, they were ready versus you're kind of behind the eight ball at that point. Well, Angie, this has been a really good conversation. I feel like we keep asking you about certain things. Do you want to leave us with, I don't always do this, but I feel like you got some good for us if I ask you this question. What do you think is the moral of the story? Let's think about, if there's a fractional CMO listening to this episode, they haven't really dipped their toes in too much. What do you most want them to know?
I think to prioritize trust over eyeballs is probably the biggest one. And the way that I define that when I'm working with clients is I want to think about how do we share your wisdom, your story, and your personality. Because even if we're leveraging AI to do that, like those are things that AI can't do. It doesn't have your story, your wisdom, or your personality. If you keep sharing those things and prioritize trust over eyeballs, you'll get meaningful growth on LinkedIn that'll actually further your business rather than just get you a ton of impressions.
I love that message. Very aligned with what we talk about at Dialogue. Trust over growth. I tell people all the time, you need visibility. Yes. But visibility on its own is crap if you don't have trust. Well, Angie, where can we learn more about you?
Yeah, so I'll obviously follow me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, it's sweetghost.com, sweet like C-suite, so SUITE.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you again.
Thanks so much, Justin. This was fun.